Well, Pitt's 2026 recruiting class got started yesterday with the first commitment of the year coming in for the Panthers. They landed a quarterback commitment to jumpstart the 2026 recruiting class. It's early to land a commitment, but not that early to land quarterbacks. We know that quarterbacks tend to commit early, and Pitt got one yesterday in Angelo Renda. He's a quarterback at South Lake Carroll High School, a powerhouse program in the state of Texas, one that has a long and illustrious history of producing quarterbacks. We'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about what Renda brings to Pitt, how he fits in with this offense, what it tells us about Cade Bell's preference for quarterbacks, and kind of what it means overall for this offense going forward as we talk about the state of the quarterback position at Pitt. Pitt's got a commitment, 2026. We're talking recruiting, we're talking quarterbacks, we're talking Pitt football here on the Morning Pitt, the Thursday edition on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So I don't know if we were expecting any recruiting news to pop up yesterday. I don't know if we were expecting the 2026 recruiting class to jump for Pitt and get a head start, but there was, as Pitt landed a commitment from Angelo Renda, a quarterback from South Lake Carroll High School in Texas. We'll talk a lot about that, of course, here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt. Some recruiting news. It's always fun to talk about recruiting. It's always interesting and exciting to talk about recruiting. And I'll say right off the bat, as we jump into a recruiting conversation, I know that there are a lot of Pitt fans out there, probably a lot of fans of a lot of schools out there that say, I just don't even pay attention to recruiting anymore. It just doesn't matter. Half these guys are going to decommit and the other half are going to transfer before they get to their second year. And I mean, those are obviously hyperboles. It's obviously an exaggeration, but there's some truth. Yeah, if Pitt has 19 commitments or 18 commitments by June 30th, a handful of those guys are not going to sign. You're going to lose a few decommitments along the way, one way or the other. And yeah, a handful more of those guys are going to decommit after their transfer after their freshman year, or transfer after their sophomore year, or transfer after their junior year. That's inevitable. That's part of the recruiting cycle now. I almost think, although coaches don't really admit it, I almost think they sort of bake that into the numbers. Oh, we've got 18 commitments now. We'll probably sign 15 of these guys. And so I understand if you might feel like your interest is waning a little. But like we talked about yesterday, recruiting is still absolutely the foundation of how these programs are built. Programs like Pitt in particular. You're going to add transfers to top it off. You know, it might be at the position here or position there. And it's funny, after I said that yesterday, that, oh, you get a couple transfers each year and you can kind of fill in your roster wherever you need it. I mean, last year Pitt had starting quarterbacks, starting running backs, starting wide receiver, starting center, starting left guard were all transfers. On defense, you had I don't know if he was a starting defensive tackle, but Nick James was out there a lot. Starting defensive end was a transfer. Starting safety was a transfer. Your top three corner was a transfer. I mean, so Pitt did rely a lot on transfers, but they also had a whole bunch of the team, a pretty sizable bulk of the team made up of homegrown players, recruited players. And that's still going to form the foundation of these programs, particularly a program like Pitt is going to be the foundation. It's going to be built in recruiting. And you might be able to go out and, from the transfer portal, get an Eli Holstein, a guy who hasn't played at all, like completely raw and inexperienced coming from a power program, or a Keaton Slovis who maybe he's got a couple games under his belt here or there. But chances are your next big time quarterback, the guy who's going to lead you to your, a lot of victories and a successful season, is going to be a player that you recruited. I think Eli Holstein's got at least 1 year left, if not two, depending on how well he plays this year. And then they could go look for a transfer, but my guess is, let's say Eli Holstein has a really big season in 2025 and decides to go to the NFL. I don't know if that's likely or not, but let's just, for the sake of argument and this hypothetical, say it. I think in 2026, your options that they'll likely choose from will be Julian Duggar, Mason Heinschel, or Angelo Renda. One of these guys that they've recruited out of high school, not necessarily brought in as a transfer. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll go get a transfer quarterback that year if they don't feel great about some of these guys or if some of them have transferred. But chances are I think the bulk of your team, the foundation of your team is still going to be built through recruiting. And so this recruiting stuff still matters. Getting a quarterback commitment still matters. As they add to this 2026 recruiting class, it still matters. Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington are going to be a big part of the team this year. They were recruited players. Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles, Cruz Brookins, Rashad Battle, Rylan Gandy before he transferred, Sincere Edwards before he transferred, Ryan Barron, Branson Taylor. I mean, the list goes on. That, you can pick out a few transfers who are going to make an impact, and you're going to add a few of those guys every year. But the majority of your team is going to come from high school recruiting, and so this does matter. Pitt's commitment that they got yesterday from Angelo Renda in the 2026 recruiting class, first commitment in the class, it matters. It's important and it's relevant. So what do they get? Who is Angelo Renda? We on Rivals, we've got him listed at 6 foot 180. I think he lists himself at 5'11", 180 or somewhere around there. And so he's a bit of a smaller guy, and you can see that on film. You can see that he's not the tallest player on the field, but what you can also see on film is that he's got a pretty live arm for a guy his size, and he can run really well. And the numbers all sort of bear that out. Completed 70% of his passes this past season, his first year as a starter. Threw for 3,900 yards, 40 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He also rushed for 14 touchdowns while averaging 7 yards per rushing attempt. You like those numbers. You should like those numbers. And you should also like this number. He led his team to a 15-1 season. And they actually started off 15-0 before they lost the state championship game, playing at the 6A level in Texas, which is a pretty impressive level of football. And not to mention, he's playing at a big-time program. South Lake Carroll is one of those powerhouse programs in Texas, one of those schools that has a reputation, and for good reason. They win a lot, and they put a lot of big-time players into college ranks and the NFL, and that's particularly true at quarterback. The list of quarterbacks who have come out of this high school is pretty impressive. You go back to a guy like Riley Dodge, who's actually the son of Todd Dodge, who was the head coach at South Lake Carroll. He ended up being the quarterback's coach at Pitt for 1 year under Todd Graham. But Riley Dodge was a guy who threw for more than 7,000 yards, 8,000 yards over the course of 2 seasons at South Lake Carroll. Went on and played at North Texas and had a good career there. Chase Daniel, who went to Missouri and was a Heisman Trophy finalist, came out of South Lake Carroll. Chris Brown. This is a random one before I get into some of the other bigger names. Chris Brown, remember the Steelers kicker? The guy who was a kicker for a number of years? He was a quarterback at South Lake Carroll in the 1990s. Greg McElroy, who went to Alabama and is on TV now, was a quarterback at South Lake Carroll. Kenny Hill, who went to Texas A&M. He was the starter after Johnny Manziel, and then ended up transferring to TCU. He led TCU to an 11-3 season in 2016, South Lake Carroll. Graham Knowles, who's at Georgia Tech right now. Caden Anderson, who's at Wyoming right now. And Quinn Ewers at Texas. All South Lake Carroll guys. That's quite a legacy. Now, Renda is taking over for Knowles, who I believe took over for Ewers, but he might have taken over for Anderson. I get the sequence not completely lined up. But Riley Dodge, who I mentioned, Todd Dodge's son, who was a very successful quarterback at South Lake Carroll, is now the head coach at South Lake Carroll. And so when he needed to replace Graham Knowles as the quarterback at South Lake Carroll, Angelo Renda was the next guy up and went through a whole process over the course of the summer. I was just reading an article in, I think, the Dallas newspaper about how they went through a whole quarterback school over the course of the summer to get him ready to lead this team that had the highest of aspirations. I mean, this is a team that enters every year with the expectation to win a state championship. They haven't won one in a few years, but that's the expectation. And Renda comes in, throws for almost 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, 11 picks, rushes for 14 touchdowns, and they get off to a 15-0 start before they lose in the state title game by a touchdown. And in that state title game, he threw for 350 yards, and he completed 69% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, and he had 2 picks. So downside there. Didn't really rush much. But you can bet he's coming back pretty hungry as a senior in the fall, looking to win that state championship. So you've got a guy who's put up huge numbers at a school known for producing Division I quarterbacks, and he can run. There's a lot to like. I think when you look at that total combined package, there's a lot to like. You can see up at the top there, we've got our article. It features a photo of Angelo Renda hanging out with Cade Bell and Jacob Bernowski. They visited his school on Tuesday. And so, you kind of feel like that was maybe when the final sales pitch was made. Bell offered Renda early in January. This has really just been a relationship for a few weeks, but Renda liked enough of what he saw. He also had offers from SMU as well as UTSA and forget the other one. It was another group of 5 school. This is going to bug me now. I'm drawing a blank on it. But SMU, obviously a relevant offer, a notable offer. It might have been North Texas or someplace like that. But so and a couple other schools sort of sniffing around. They'll certainly be keeping an eye on him. You're not going to hide Angelo Renda at South Lake Carroll. You're not going to hide at that school. That is a prominent school with a lot of eyes on it all the time. Mason Heinchel, Pitt's quarterback commitment in the 2025 class, who's on campus right now as a true freshman at Pitt. He was kind of hidden away at Clay High School in Oregon, Ohio. Last year. Not a lot of people knew about Clay High School. Not a lot of people were paying attention to that. Some schools kind of came in late. I think Michigan got involved late, or maybe sort of put a feeler out there in case they lost the quarterback who they were battling with LSU for, the number 1 guy, Underwood or whatever his name is. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank because it doesn't matter. I wasn't paying much attention to it. I keep drawing a blank. I'm always I space out sometimes on some of these details. But Michigan, when they thought they might lose their quarterback, reached out to Mason Heinchel, but he was largely sort of hidden away there. You're not going to hide Angelo Renda. And if Angelo Renda goes off for another huge season this fall, another 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, the kind of season he had this year, there might be some other schools that come after him. This might be a situation where Pitt is helped by Renda's height. Renda, not the tallest guy. You can kind of see in that photo there, and it's a photo he tweeted, so you can look on Twitter and see it a little bit better. He's not that much taller than Cade Bell, and Cade Bell is not a tall guy. He looks like he's a little bit shorter than Jacob Bernowski in that photo, and Bernowski's not a tall guy. So, Renda's height might be held against him by a lot of schools, but Cade Bell sees a good fit for him, and I see it too. I can see why Cade Bell likes this guy. He throws the ball all over the place. He's got a high completion percentage, so he's pretty efficient. Obviously scores a lot of touchdowns, more or less protects the ball. 11 picks is a lot, but he threw the ball a ton. Still completed better than 70% of his passes. And the mobility, his ability to run. And this was something, I feel like a year ago, we did a Morning Pitt about Cade Bell and quarterback recruiting and kind of the quarterbacks he had offered after getting to Pitt, like who he offered that first January and February, and kind of looking at the top 6 or so guys who had emerged as the main targets, Mason Heinchel being one of them, and tried to find some common threads. And out of almost pretty much every one of those guys, maybe 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 5, whatever our list was, they all had running ability. They could all break down, when the play broke down, they were able to take off and run. They could run draws and design quarterback runs, and they could also keep plays alive, extend plays and improvise and do all of those things. You saw those common threads. That's the kind of quarterback that Cade Bell wanted, and you saw how Eli Holstein was able to make plays. I think Mason Heinchel and now Angelo Renda are even faster than Eli Holstein. I think they've got even better agility and running ability than Holstein does. And Holstein, I think you saw when you didn't have that in the Clemson game or the Boston College game, you saw how Pitt's offense suffered not having his running ability. There probably would have been a few extra first downs picked up if Eli Holstein had been available and played. So you could see the advantages of having the mobility. You could tell by Cade Bell's offering patterns that he obviously has a preference for the mobility, and now he's got another guy who fits in that mold. And I think there are some similarities between Renda and Mason Heinchel in terms of being really productive, in terms of mobility. Heinchel is probably a little bit bigger than Renda. Renda also probably had a little bit better talent playing around him than Heinchel. I think Renda has other D1 guys on his offense, particularly at the skill positions, whereas Heinchel does not. There aren't many D1 guys who have come out of Oregon, Clay High School in Oregon, Ohio. Whereas South Lake Carroll has, like I say, a long lineage of producing these kinds of guys. But we're not. I don't hold that against Angelo Renda, I give him credit for going out there with some really talented players around him and getting 3,900 yards, 40 touchdowns, 11 picks. It's a heck of a way to start the recruiting class. I think it's an old cliche, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true, that it's good to get a quarterback on, in your class early, get a quarterback on board as soon as you can so he can help lead the charge in building the rest of the class. Quarterbacks often take on a recruiting role in the class, a leader of the class. And I think even Angelo Renda said that when he talked to Jim, yesterday when they did an interview. He talked about how he wanted to be, he wanted to get the class started for Pitt and help Pitt get that, get things rolling. So he'll have an opportunity to do that. Heinschel definitely took on that role last year. I think he was the second player to commit to Pitt in the class of 2025 after Trevor Summers. Heinschel committed in like February, maybe March. And got on it pretty quick and became a leader in that class, along with Shep Turk. The guy from Thomas Jefferson is apparently one of the big leaders in that class as well. But Heinschel definitely did his job and worked hard on getting other recruits to commit. I think Angelo Renda is looking forward to that opportunity as well. Other thoughts, I think obviously Renda likes what he sees in Cade Bell's offense. I think you have to, if you're thinking about the appeal of Cade Bell's offense and you're just limiting, if your thoughts are heavily influenced by the Toledo game and the final 5 games of the regular season, I think you need to remember what this offense looked like when they had most or all of the starting personnel available and healthy. You have to remember what this offense looked like in 2 years at Western Carolina. I think Cade Bell still has a lot that he can sell to a quarterback in particular and offensive skill guys in general. I think he can point to Desmond Reed's success. He can point to Eli Holstein's success. He can point to the numbers that, like Kanate Munfield to some extent put up at Pitt, and more so the numbers that Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee put up at Western Carolina, what Desmond Reed did at Western Carolina, how the quarterbacks performed. He can look at this offense. He can point out this offense and say, look, these are all the things that we're able to do in this offense when we're healthy and everybody's playing well. Like, this is how good it can be. This is how explosive it can be. This is how much we can score. This is how we can go up and down the field on teams. This is how the offense really works. Now, yeah, we ran into some troubles. We lost our starting left tackle. We lost our quarterback, and we had a 6-game losing streak, and that was rough. But you know what? When we get everybody healthy, we're hard to stop. He can sell that. He can sell that. And like you, as a Pitt fan, you're going to sit back and be like, oh, well, what about the Cal game? What about the Syracuse game? And you're right. And I think those are things that Cade Bell should probably answer for at some point. But if you're Cade Bell and you're recruiting to Pitt right now, you've got a lot, I think, to sell. I think you have a lot of ways you can convince guys that this is a good offense and one that'll be pretty productive and successful. And I think that's what, obviously I think that's what he sold to Angelo Renda. That's how he convinced him to want to commit to Pitt. So good score for Pitt, I think, to start off the recruiting class with a quarterback. This isn't just a defensive lineman out of Florida. This is a quarterback at a big-time program. I think you can sell that to other recruits too, but like, hey, the next big guy coming out of Quinn Ewers High School, yeah, he's coming to Pitt. I think you can use that. And I think you can sell you can use Quinn Ewers' success to help recruit to Pitt, whether you're recruiting receivers or whatever it might be. I think you can use that and sell recruits on it. So, that's part of how it works in recruiting is you find all the different angles you can possibly pursue, and then you pursue them. But they landed Angelo Renda, first commitment in the 2026 recruiting class, quarterback out of South Lake Carroll High School. Pretty outstanding prospect, it looks like, and we'll see how his career goes. We think he'll be on campus at some point in the near future to come up for a visit and check out Pitt for himself. He committed without seeing the campus of the facilities, but I think that's a testament to what he thinks of Cade Bell and what he thinks of the Panthers offense. So good commitment for Pitt there, getting the 2026 recruiting class started with a bang. We got our mailbag tomorrow, so there's still time to post some questions and contribute to the mailbag if you'd like. Go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board on Panther-Lair.com and submit your question on Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, whatever else might be on your mind. We got it all there. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the place to submit your questions for the mailbag tomorrow. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I think that about does it. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Thursday. Stay warm. I think it's going to warm up a little bit today. So, don't put on your bathing suit yet, but it'll be a little bit warmer than it's been. So enjoy it, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.